Hi, and welcome to POV, your favorite weekly political commentary show. Now today, or following on from last week, because fuel is up, this is up, everything's up, but symbols are down. So let's get it. Now in last week's episode, we spoke about how fuel prices were subsidized on the foreign component because RBZ was giving Forex at 1:1. If this subsidy is removed as is planned, and we agree that it should be, the price of fuel will rise to the $5 region. Now, of course, we received a lot of questions because of this statement, because that very evening, the RBZ issued a statement removing the exchange rate subsidy effective the following day on the 21st of May 2019, thus raising the price of fuel again. Now, trust me, when this happened, at POV, we all looked at each other with sipping tea side-eye because the coincidence was a bit prophetesque to say the least. But while we didn't know when it was going to happen, the bottom line was it had to happen. Why? Well, one of many reasons is that we were paying a price too low and with no relation to the real cost of the commodity. Zimbabwe went from having the most expensive fuel in the world to the cheapest in a matter of weeks. That's crazy. And that kind of heavy subsidizing could only lead to an eventual price hike. And it did. And so we all know that it went up, as we predicted, from $3.30 to $5. Now, how did they come up with this new price, you ask? Interestingly enough, the Ministry of Finance did two things to come up with that price. The first is that they raised the exchange rate between the RTGS and US dollars from $3.49 to $4.61. And then they reduced the fuel duties by $1.15. That's what they did. And I know you're probably saying to yourself, that's fantastic, Kuda. That's great, Kuda. But what does it mean? Does this mean that the fuel queues will magically disappear and service stations will be wet again? No, sadly, it doesn't. Firstly, government has removed the Forex Center from the RBZ to banks. Fuel companies are now competing with every other company on the interbank market to get their Forex requirements, and this is going to be a nightmare to say the least. Secondly, there aren't enough funds currently on the interbank market as it stands, so the little that there is has to be shared as much as possible, leaving fuel companies with access to, of course, relatively small amounts against their demands. Fuel companies need approximately $3 million per day to cover our needs, before we even talk about covering their debts as well. Okay, but what about this tweet? And that tweet? Well, the publicized $500 million facility from AfriExim Bank is being drip-fed into the market and not just dumped in full. We don't know at what rate and over what period of time, so whether this money is actually going to be helpful for what it really needs to pay for, well, we simply don't know. And the last thing, of course, is the whole fuel procurement process takes about a week in the current environment. So transactions starting today might only lead to the fuel getting into our cars next week. So from the time that money comes in to the time that it actually changes our lives, it could be a matter of weeks, months. We simply don't know. So what needs to be done? Authorities need to allow those bidding for Forex to set prices that entice exporters to sell their Forex on the interbank willingly. The whole premise of the interbank market was to kill the black market, but it doesn't seem to be doing a great job at this simply because there's a lack of confidence that everybody has in it. And the lack of confidence comes from things like this. On Tuesday morning last week, the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority, ZERA, issued two conflicting notices within 2 hours of each other. The first was a no price change notice to all fuel retailers full of fire and brimstone reminiscent of the days of old. And then the second, a new fuel prices with immediate effect memo showing the effect of the new price regime. 2 hours, guys. 2 hours. Now, we've spoken about bad communications coming from government structures many times on this show, but clearly this is a classic example. How is one meant to feel confident that the system has this under control when it can produce two conflicting statements in such a short space of time? Chibabist, please, let's see an end to this. Now, the fuel situation continues obviously to be close to our hearts, so we're going to follow it closely for you. But for now, we've left you with that little bit of information so that you can start understanding where we need to go in order to overcome this. More is going to come a little later. Now onto a subject that we've received many requests for us to cover: exchange rates. Exchange rates have been on most Zimbabweans' lips for more than 3 years now. And it's a language that most of us understand. I mean, almost every morning, every urban Zimbo's first question is, Sha, what's the rate today? It drives us. It gets our blood running with both excitement and dread. Even if you don't actually deal in money or do anything, it's just something that you've learned to ask. But what drives our rate, and why does it change on a daily basis? This is what we hope to explain. So let's start with the obvious. What is an exchange rate? Simply put, exchange rates are the value of one currency against another. This is the function economy's productivity and confidence the market has in the policies and in Zimbabwe. These two things have been greatly lacking in our country, which is why it fluctuates more than necessarily. So who sets the exchange rate in the first place? Well, we have the interbank rate, which is determined by the buying and selling happening within banks. This has been criticized in many circles as being controlled and managed at artificially low levels, resulting in forex earners completely shunning it. You see, when it was introduced at a starting rate of 2.5 to the US dollar back in February, the RBZ gave banks seed capital to oil the market in hopes that exporters would start selling their forex on the official market to get the system going. Unfortunately, the growing disparity between the interbank and parallel rates continues to make it unattractive, as many people would rather deal with Jonso under a tree than to walk into a bank and do business properly. And as a result, the parallel market rate is something that is completely crazy. Now, the parallel market, that's a totally separate creature in its own. No one really knows how it's set or who its main actors are or how big it is. But as it stands, that's where many organizations and individuals are accessing their forex. So scarce is the forex that many establishments have resorted to lowering the US dollar price of their goods and services just to entice customers to release it. So we have an official market that is choked and starved by overregulation, and a parallel market that operates in gray and black and adds that heavy risk element to the rate. So what needs to happen to bring all this rate madness down? We've boiled it down to 3 things. The first is confidence. Confidence needs to return to the formal system. If you're finding that a company is willing to send a guy with a bag under a tree to get forex, that's not a good look. And on top of that, isn't it funny that people will queue for hours in a line at the bank to receive peanuts, but we'll find these tree dwellers with hundreds of thousands of dollars? That's food for thought. And also, productivity needs to return. How many hours are we losing in fuel queues? Or how much money are we losing while we're waiting for electricity to come back or diverting funds to fuel generators? It's simply not good enough. And the third thing is we need reduced interference in the resolving of these monetary issues. Simply put, what I mean by that point is let Zimbos be Zimbos. We are perfectly capable of solving our own problems in this area. What we need is an environment in which we can trust that if we apply ourselves, we will be able to get the results necessary. Let me expand a little bit on that in my POV. I only have one question, and my question is, what is the strategy moving forward to properly deal with this situation? I'm having conversations with people who are saying that the fuel price has to go up again. I'm having conversations with people who are saying there's no way they can do that because it will totally destroy us, which is true. If some of us can afford to deal with maybe, say, a $7 fuel increase or a $9 bottle of cooking oil or a $20 bottle of cooking oil, what about the person who's living in difficult times or who's got a lot of children to take care of? What about the increasing school fees that are going all around? What is the strategy to get us through this? Because while some of us are scraping through, others are not able to even make the smallest of plans. I would like to hear a minister or a public servant come out with a strategy to tell us what is the step-by-step process to get us through this situation. Once we hear that, perhaps maybe we might be able to find some confidence in that strategy. But until then, my name is Kuda Mangwe, and I'm wishing you a good morning, good afternoon, and a good night.